The sharp, metallic scrape was the first sound I heard as I clawed my way out of a 15-day twilight. For a moment, I thought it was the gates of heaven opening, but when my eyes fluttered open, all I saw was the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. A nurse told me my waking was a medical miracle. I didn't realize then that the real miracle was the hell my loving husband Michael had managed to construct for me in just 15 short days. He sold my condo, the one my parents bought for me. He took the money, and he took the woman he'd hidden for 10 years, his college sweetheart, and flew to a future that didn't include me. Just as his plane was likely taking off, he would have received a text message. Pursuant to an emergency court order, the 3 bank accounts under your name have been frozen by your wife, Ava Chen. My consciousness felt like a deep-sea diver submerged in darkness, being violently yanked to the surface by an invisible line. I broke free, my eyes snapping open. The first thing I saw was the rhythmic drip of a saline bag on an IV stand, each drop a tiny, transparent metronome marking my return to the world. She's awake, the patient in bed 3 is awake. A crisp female voice cut through the quiet hum of the room, followed by a flurry of footsteps. Doctors and nurses swarmed my bedside, a barrage of questions and flashing pen lights that felt distant and unreal, as if I were watching it all through frosted glass. All I remembered was driving home from the office, a kid no older than 10 darting into the street against the light. I swerved hard. The world became a symphony of screeching tires and shattering glass before dissolving into silence. "Miss Chen, how are you feeling?" My attending physician, a man with kind eyes and wire-rimmed glasses, looked at me with profound relief. I tried to speak, my throat as dry and rough as sandpaper. "Michael," I rasped, "my husband, is he here?" A flicker of unease went through me as I asked. It wasn't like Michael. For the 5 years we'd been married, he had been the very picture of doting devotion, the man my friends all called a unicorn. If I so much as sneezed, he'd be there with soup and a blanket. A car crash like this, he should have been welded to my bedside. The doctors and nurses exchanged a look, a subtle, uncomfortable shift in their professional calm. A young nurse finally spoke up, her voice hesitant. "Mr. Sterling, he already processed your discharge papers a few days ago. He said he was taking you home to recuperate." Discharge? My heart sank like a stone, but I only just woke up. "We know. We all thought it was very strange," the nurse whispered, leaning closer. "He insisted you only had a mild concussion and were fine to go home. We couldn't talk him out of it. He kept saying he was your legal husband and had the right to make medical decisions. He complained about the cost, that the hospital was trying to milk him for money." Complain about the cost? That was absurd. Michael ran a small but respected boutique architectural firm. My family, on the other hand, was very comfortable. The Nob Hill condo my parents had bought for me, paid in full before our wedding, was now worth a fortune. We never, ever worried about money. "No, that can't be right," I said, shaking my head. "He must have had an emergency. Something with his company." The attending physician cleared his throat gently, cutting through my denial. "Miss Chen, for now you need to focus on your recovery. Regarding your husband, we strongly suggest you try to contact him." The pity and evasion in their eyes felt like 1,000 tiny needles piercing my heart. A sense of dread, cold and suffocating, began to wrap around me like a vine. Ignoring the doctor's advice, I ripped the IV needle from the back of my hand. Ignoring the nurse's protests, I summoned what little strength I had and stumbled out of the room. I had to get home. I needed an explanation. The hospital corridor reeked of antiseptic, making me nauseous. I leaned against the wall at the nurse's station and used their phone to dial a number etched into my soul. "The number you have dialed is not in service." The cold, automated voice was a hammer blow to my chest. I took a deep, shuddering breath, clinging to the last shred of my composure. I hailed a cab outside, my voice trembling as I gave the driver an address that had once meant warmth and belonging. The 40-minute drive felt like an eternity. As the cab turned onto our familiar tree-lined street, I could see our building in the distance, our home on the 15th floor. The windows were wide open, but they looked hollow, lifeless. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every second waiting for the elevator was torture. When the doors finally chimed open, I practically fell out, sprinting down the hall. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open with a trembling hand, and the sight that greeted me, the utter cavernous emptiness, drained the blood from my body. The custom-built console table in the entryway where our wedding portrait used to sit was gone. A few lone screws littered the hardwood floor. In the living room, my favorite Eames lounge chair, the hand-woven Turkish rug, the entire Sonos sound system we'd picked out together vanished. The walls bore faint discolored rectangles where our art had once hung ugly scars left after the soul of our home had been ripped away. It didn't look like a home, it looked like a crime scene. I walked through the ransacked rooms, the master bedroom, the office, the walk-in closet. Everything that could be moved was gone. Only a few worthless odds and ends remained scattered on the floor, mocking my naivety. I stopped in the center of the empty closet. This was where our clothes should have been. Now a single lonely wire hanger remained. On it hung a woman's trench coat I'd never seen before. Tucked into the collar was a single long strand of straight black hair. Not mine. My hair was dark but styled in loose waves. My eyes drifted downward, landing on a crumpled ball of paper in the corner. A cold premonition washed over me as I walked over and picked it up, my fingers numb. I smoothed it out. It was a copy of a flight itinerary. 2 tickets, one for Michael Sterling, the other for a name that struck me like a poisoned dagger, Sophia Lynn. Sophia Lynn, the one that got away. Michael's college sweetheart, the one great regret he'd ever mentioned, assuring me it was all in the past, that I was the only one he loved now. I had believed him. The destination was Vancouver. The departure time was 9:00 a.m. Today, beneath the itinerary was another piece of paper. Not a copy, an original. The header was printed in stark, bold letters, Grant Deed. The seller, the grantor, was listed as Michael Sterling, as my attorney, in fact. His signature, confident and sharp, was just as it had been on the love letters he'd written me years ago. The buyer, the grantee, was a corporation I'd never heard of. The sale price for my condo, worth nearly $4 million on the open market, was listed as a shocking $1.5 million. He'd sold it in a fire sale. The date of the signing was 3 days after I'd been admitted to the hospital. He wasn't watching over me. He was orchestrating my ruin. He was planning the great escape. My whole body trembled. I finally collapsed onto the cold, hard floor. All those years of tenderness, of whispered promises and sweet nothings, all of it a lie. He had just been waiting for the perfect opportunity to cash me out and run to the woman he truly wanted. My accident, my coma, it wasn't a tragedy for him. It was a golden ticket. A wave of crushing despair and the raw agony of betrayal washed over me. I curled into a ball in the middle of the empty room and I laughed. I laughed until bitter tears streamed down my face. Ava, you are the world's biggest fool. After a long time, the laughter subsided. I wiped my face, and from the depths of that soul-crushing cold, I pulled out my phone. The screen was shattered from the crash, a spiderweb of broken glass. Miraculously, it powered on. With shaking hands, I opened a long, dormant, encrypted folder. Inside were a handful of contacts, the last resort I had prepared for myself before marrying Michael, a parachute I never thought I'd need. Before I gave it all up for him, for a life of domestic simplicity, I was a junior partner at one of the country's top law firms, my specialty international asset forfeiture and tech litigation. I had walked away from it all because I thought I'd found happiness. I'd only traded one complex case for another, and this time I was the client. I dialed one of the numbers. A calm, steady male voice answered almost immediately. "Ava, is that you?" It was Leo, my former associate, now a senior attorney at the firm. "It's me, Leo." My voice was unnervingly calm. "I need you to do something for me." A man named Michael Sterling. He was on a 9:00 a.m. flight to Vancouver this morning. I need the credit card he used to book the ticket. And I need a real-time transaction history for every bank account and credit card in his name. Done. "But Ava, are you?" "I'm fine." I cut him off, my gaze drifting to the bleak gray sky outside. "One more thing. Prepare a lawsuit. I'm filing an ex parte motion for an emergency asset freeze against my husband, Michael Sterling. Everything, including the operating accounts for his firm." Michael Sterling. "Did you think you'd won? The game has just begun." Leo's efficiency was breathtaking. Less than 30 minutes later, an encrypted email landed in my inbox. It contained a stark, clear timeline of Michael's last 15 days, a cold, hard map of his crime. The day I was admitted to the ICU, he didn't spend a single minute by my side. He went straight to the bank, trying to use the supplementary credit card I'd given him to transfer the large balance from our joint savings account. The bank's fraud detection system thankfully stopped him. A transfer that large required my biometric approval or in-person verification. He failed, so he moved to Plan B. The next day, he contacted a real estate agent he'd clearly already lined up. He used a forged power of attorney, complete with my forged signature, to list my condo. To ensure a quick cash sale, he priced it at a ludicrously low value, less than half its market worth. Within a week, he had a buyer and had closed the deal. $1.5 million wired directly into his personal account. With the money secured, he immediately booked a first-class ticket to Vancouver for Sophia Lynn. For himself, to avoid suspicion, he booked a seat in economy on the same flight. The email also included an itemized list of his recent expenses: a $20,000 Hermes Birkin bag, a $15,000 Van Cleef & Arpels necklace, a whirlwind tour of luxury boutiques totaling over $100,000. All of it charged in the 3 days after he received the money from the sale. I could picture it perfectly, him and Sophia laughing as they swiped his card, spending the money from my parents' life savings to build a glittering new life for themselves. All while I was lying in a hospital bed fighting for my life. At the end of the email, Leo added a note: "Ava, the buyer is strange. It's an offshore shell corporation. The money trail is almost too clean, like it was run through a professional laundry. This feels bigger than just your husband. Are you sure you want to go head-to-head on this?" I stared at the words, a cold smile forming on my lips. Bigger. Few things in this world are bigger or more complicated than the treachery of the human heart. I replied, "Proceed as planned. Also do some digging on Michael's firm, Sterling Designs. Are they in the running for the Cypress Cove development project?" Cypress Cove was the biggest real estate development in the state in years. Whichever firm landed the master design contract would be set for life. Michael had been working himself to the bone on his proposal for months. He'd excitedly told me his design had made it to the final round of consideration. He had a real shot. It was his dream. Now I was going to crush it in my bare hands. Leo's reply came back instantly. "Yes, they're one of the 3 finalists. The final decision is announced next Monday." Excellent. I shut my phone and stood up, surveying the empty shell of my home. The faint scent of Michael's cologne, cedarwood, and bergamot still lingered in the air, now mingled with the cloying sweetness of another woman's perfume. It was nauseating. I needed an arsenal, a place to rearm. I thought of one person. Half an hour later, I stood before a discreet coffee shop in Hayes Valley called The Glitch. A small digital sign on the door read, "System offline. Rebooting tomorrow." I pushed the door open and walked in. Inside, a woman in a stylishly minimalist black jumpsuit was meticulously polishing a Chemex brewer behind the counter. Without looking up, she said in a cool voice, "Sign says we're closed." "Zoe," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's me." Her hands stilled. She slowly looked up. When she saw my pale face and the ugly bruise on my wrist from the IV, her sharp eyebrows knitted together. "Jesus, Ava. What the hell happened to you?" Zoe dropped the cloth and rushed out from behind the counter to steady me. "You look like you just broke out of a hospital." I did. Zoe was my college roommate, my best and only friend. A certified genius who'd aced law school only to pivot and become one of the country's most sought-after white-hat hackers. This coffee shop was just a front. "I need to borrow your armory," I said, getting straight to the point. Zoe's armory was a climate-controlled, soundproofed room on the second floor. It contained no coffee beans or grinders. Only rows of servers humming with a cool blue light and a wall of monitors displaying cascading lines of code. She didn't ask any more questions. She just gave me a long, hard look and led me upstairs. "Same rules as always," she said, keying in a complex passcode. "I provide the hardware. I'm not a party to your operations." "I know." It was our understanding. The door hissed open, revealing the familiar high-tech sanctuary. I sat down at the main terminal, plugged in my shattered phone, and began exporting the data. Zoe placed a mug of hot tea beside me and stood behind my chair, watching the code scroll across the screens. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Michael did this." It wasn't a question. I didn't look back, just grunted a soft, "I told you," she said, a new anger hardening her voice. That guy's smile never reached his eyes. He wasn't built for the long haul. And you gave up your partnership at the firm for him. Ava, you were a fool. "Yes, I was," I said with a self-deprecating smile, "but I'm not anymore." As I spoke, I pulled up the network architecture for Sterling Designs. Years ago, I had built his company's entire cybersecurity system myself. I had given him an impenetrable fortress, which meant, of course, I had also built myself a secret back door. I needed one thing, the one thing that would utterly and completely destroy him. His entire proposal for the Cypress Cove project, all his designs, renderings, and core creative concepts. My fingers flew across the keyboard. The commands and protocols long dormant came back to me like loyal soldiers answering a call to arms. Zoe said nothing more, just stood by a silent, supportive presence. She knew the old Ava was back. It took me less than 10 minutes to bypass his firewalls and gain access to the core server. I found the encrypted folder labeled Cypress Cove, Final. The password mockingly was Sophia Lynn 1998. I took a deep breath, compressed the entire folder, and uploaded it to an anonymous, encrypted cloud server. Then, using the highest-level administrative privileges, I formatted every backup file on his entire network. Finally, I planted a small, elegant piece of malware, a logic bomb. It was programmed to detonate at 10:00 a.m. next Monday, the exact moment the winner of the Cypress Cove contract was scheduled to be announced. It would instantly and irrevocably wipe the hard drive of every computer connected to the Sterling Designs network. After it was done, I felt a sliver of strength return to my exhausted body. I swiveled in the chair to face Zoe. "Do me a favor. Send the contents of this folder anonymously to the other 2 finalists for the project." I didn't just want to destroy his work. I wanted him to watch helpless as his greatest achievements were stolen, plagiarized, and celebrated by his direct competitors. I wanted him to be professionally ruined, branded a fraud and a cheat. Zoe looked at my bloodshot eyes and nodded slowly. "Done." "But what's your next move? He's got the money, the house is sold, and he's out of the country. Ruining his career doesn't seem like enough." "Oh, it's not," I said, picking up my phone and checking the time. It would be 7:00 p.m. in Vancouver. Michael's flight had landed. He was probably just settling in with his precious Sophia, ready to start their beautiful new life. I smiled, pulled up a pre-written text message and hit send. The message would go to Michael's phone. It referenced the 3 bank accounts where he had stashed the $1.5 million from my condo, along with the last of his company's liquid assets. His entire new life was in those accounts. I could only imagine the look on his face when he turned on his phone and saw that message. "Welcome to hell, Michael. Consider this a welcome gift." At Vancouver International Airport, Michael Sterling took a long, deep breath as he stepped off the plane. The 12-hour flight had been exhausting, but his heart was filled with an exhilarating sense of freedom. He had finally escaped the cage. 5 years of marriage to Ava Chen. Her brilliance, her ambition, her sheer competence, it had been a mountain pressing down on him, suffocating him. She was the legal prodigy, the star. He was just a small business owner struggling to keep up. Everyone told him how lucky he was that he'd married up. Only he knew how it truly felt like he was living on borrowed prestige, especially around her parents, where he was always the son-in-law to be evaluated, to be subtly managed. Now it was all over. He had money, $1.5 million. It was more than enough for him and Sophia to start over in Canada, maybe even launch a new business. And Ava, she was probably still lying in a coma. By the time she woke up and figured things out, what could she do? An international lawsuit would take years and a fortune. By then, he'd have laundered the money so clean it would squeak. He almost felt grateful for that car crash. "Michael, what are you thinking about?" A soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. Sophia Lynn, radiant in a new Chanel suit, linked her arm through his. The Van Cleef & Arpels necklace glittered at her throat. "Nothing," he smiled, squeezing her hand. "Just about our new home. You always wanted a house with a garden, didn't you? Real estate is much more affordable here." "Really? Oh, Michael, that's wonderful," she chirped. "Thank you. Thank you for doing all this for me." Her eyes grew misty. "With my father's business going bankrupt, all those debts. I don't know what I would have done without you. We should use most of this money to pay off his creditors, okay? We can plan the rest later." A warmth spread through Michael's chest. This was the woman he loved. Kind, selfless, always thinking of others. Not like Ava, who was always so rational, so clinical. Even in bed, she analyzed everything like it was a legal case. "Don't be silly. Your problems are my problems," he said gallantly. "Don't worry about the money. I've got this." They collected their luggage and headed for the taxi stand bound for the 5-star hotel he'd booked. Michael switched on his phone, which had been off for the flight, intending to call an Uber Black. The moment it connected, a flood of notifications poured in. He ignored them, assuming they were just work emails from San Francisco. But then a single text message from his bank appeared at the very top of his screen. Michael's smile froze. His pupils constricted. It was as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over his head. Frozen by your wife, Ava Chen. She was supposed to be in a coma. His fingers trembled as he fumbled to open his banking app, mistyping his password twice. When he finally logged in and saw the account balance, a string of perfect zeros next to the glaring red flag, account frozen, his mind went completely blank. $1.5 million. The money from the condo, plus the 100,000 or so left of his company's operating cash. All of it in those accounts. All of it gone. How? How was this possible? Ava was awake. How could she have done this so fast from another country? A string of frantic questions detonated in his brain. "Michael, what's wrong?" Sophia asked, her face etched with concern. "You look terrible." It's nothing." He forced a smile that felt more like a grimace, quickly pocketing his phone. Just a bit of jet lag. He couldn't tell her the truth. He couldn't admit that the beautiful future he'd just promised her had evaporated into thin air. He'd just become a penniless joke. Stay calm, he told himself. Think. Even if Ava was awake, she couldn't have done this legally. A judicial asset freeze requires a court order, which takes days. She must have pulled some strings, called in a favor at the bank to get a temporary risk hold. Yes, that had to be it. It was temporary. As soon as he could prove the money was from a legitimate property sale, as soon as he could produce the power of attorney she'd signed, the hold would be lifted. He took a deep breath and pulled out his backup, a discreet, anonymous debit card, loaded with a few $1,000s. It would be enough to get them through the next few days. "Let's get to the hotel first," he said, trying to sound confident as he ushered Sophia into a taxi. But when he handed the card to the driver at the end of the ride, the POS machine spat out a slip that read "declined." The driver's friendly demeanor vanished. A cold sweat broke out on Michael's forehead. He had the driver try again. Same result. This card was locked too. He finally understood. Ava's counterattack was faster and more thorough than he could have ever imagined. She hadn't just frozen his main accounts. She had used their suspicious activity to trigger an international anti-money laundering alert, flagging every associated card and account he possessed. It was a scorched earth tactic, the kind used by the most ruthless financial litigators. He had forgotten. His wife, Ava Chen, had once been the best in the field. "Sir, are you going to pay or what? I've got other fares waiting," the driver grumbled. The curious stares of other travelers felt like needles on his skin. Sophia's smile was long gone, replaced by confusion and embarrassment. "Michael, maybe I should just use my card," she whispered. His pride, already bruised, was now being stomped into the ground. He couldn't bear the shame of admitting his failure in front of her. "No," he snapped. He frantically emptied his wallet, pulling out a chaotic mix of US dollars and Canadian currency he'd exchanged before the trip. He barely managed to scrape together enough to cover the fare. The atmosphere in the car on the way to the hotel was suffocating, Sophia asked tentatively. "What is really going on?" "It's just a temporary cash flow problem at the firm," he lied, staring out the window, unable to meet her gaze. "It'll be sorted out in a day or two." He knew he had to call his lawyer in San Francisco immediately. He dialed the number for his firm's general counsel. It rang for a long time before a panicked voice answered. "Michael, oh, thank God. It's a disaster. What happened?" "We've been served. Ava, Miss Chen is suing you and the company." "For what?" "Embezzlement, fraudulent conveyance of assets conversion." The list goes on. "The court has already issued a TRO. All your personal assets and the firm's corporate accounts are frozen solid. A temporary restraining order." Michael's heart plummeted. His worst fears were realized. Ava had used the fastest and most devastating legal weapon in her arsenal. And Michael? "It gets worse," the lawyer stammered, his voice trembling. "A few hours ago, the other two finalists for Cypress Cove, Aperture, and Horizon both suddenly released their final design proposals to the public. And they look almost identical to ours. The whole industry is buzzing. People are saying we sold the design to multiple bidders, or worse, that we plagiarized it from someone else." What the world began to spin. His masterpiece, the project, he'd bet his entire future on. How could it have been leaked? Then a horrifying thought struck him. The company's server, the supposedly state-of-the-art unbreachable system. Ava had built it. She left a back door. That woman, she had never trusted him. From the very beginning. Everything she had ever given him came with a hidden knife. Splat. A sudden sharp pain exploded in his head. A warm, metallic-tasting liquid filled his mouth. He doubled over, a violent cough racking his body. When he looked down, a spray of bright red blood stained the pristine white leather of the taxi's seat. Michael Sophia's scream was the last, most desperate sound he heard before the world faded to black. I expected Michael to call me the second he hit a wall, either screaming with rage or begging for mercy. But he didn't. That silence only confirmed what I already knew about his character. He was an egotist to the core, a man who wouldn't admit defeat until he was utterly crushed. He was probably still clinging to the fantasy that he could outsmart me. Fine. A game of cat and mouse is no fun if the mouse gives up too easily. I didn't stay at Zoe's. My battlefield was elsewhere. I went back to the empty condo. It no longer felt like a home, but it was the central fortress in this war. This was where I would win back everything that was mine. I hired a cleaning service to purge the entire place, scrubbing away every last trace of Michael and Sophia. When the last lingering scent of his cologne was gone, I felt like I had undergone a spiritual cleansing myself. Then I went online and ordered the bare essentials, a mattress, a set of sheets, a few pots and pans. That night, I slept on the mattress in the middle of the vast, empty living room. Without the plush comfort of our old bed, the firmness of the floor beneath me felt grounding, and I slept more soundly than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up to a call from Leo. "Ava, you are not going to believe this," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "The buyer of your condo, that offshore company Starlight Investments. I followed the paper trail. The majority shareholder is David Lynn. David Lynn, Sophia Lynn's father." I was quiet for a moment. It was both unexpected and perfectly logical. A classic shell game. "So that's their play," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. David Lynn and Michael had cooked up this scheme together. Lynn would pretend his company was on the verge of bankruptcy, giving Sophia a damsel-in-distress story to feed Michael. Michael, playing the heroic lover, would sell my assets to rescue her. In reality, the $1.5 million was just moving from David Lynn's left pocket into the right pocket of his daughter and future son-in-law. They were using my premarital property to solve their own financial problems and in the process launder it into their family's name. A brilliant, despicable plan. If I had died in that coma or woken up with brain damage, they would have gotten away with it forever. "There's more," Leo continued. "I looked into David Lynn's corporate financials. His company is in trouble, yes, but nowhere near bankruptcy. What he really needs is a massive game-changing project to get back on his feet. A project like, say, Cypress Cove." The pieces clicked into place. Michael leaking his own proposal wasn't just spite, it was another gift for the Lynn family. He was sacrificing his own firm to give his future father-in-law a winning, fully developed design proposal for next to nothing. He was paving David Lynn's road to recovery with the rubble of my life. "So what's our move?" Leo asked. "This is a complicated fraud. The sales contract itself is facially valid. Michael was your husband and he had a power of attorney with your signature on it. Even if we prove it's a forgery, a lawsuit to reclaim the title could drag on for years." Years. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the bustling city below. I don't have years to play their game. I need a weak point. A single pressure point that will make this entire seemingly perfect chain of evidence collapse. The weak point was in the grant deed itself. I had Leo send me a high-resolution scan. I zoomed in, examining every clause, every signature, every punctuation mark. Michael was arrogant, but he wasn't a lawyer. The scheme he and David Lynn had concocted was designed to look airtight, but the more perfect a forgery tries to be, the more likely it is to have a fatal flaw. And then I found it. In a tiny, almost unnoticeable corner at the bottom of the signature page. Below the signature for the grantee and grantor was a line for the attesting witness, the notary public. The signature belonged to a man I knew very well, Kevin Cho. Kevin Cho, Michael's old college buddy, now a partner at a small, moderately successful local law firm, a man who had once asked me out and been politely rejected. I remembered telling Michael on more than one occasion that I found Kevin's legal style to be opportunistic and shallow. Michael had probably chosen him as the witness partly out of friendship and partly out of a pathetic need to prove that his connections were just as good as mine. And that was his biggest mistake. Any competent lawyer, when notarizing a transaction involving the sale of one spouse's significant premarital real estate, has a professional and ethical duty to ensure both parties are present and consenting, especially in a situation where one spouse is incapacitated. The authenticity of that power of attorney should have been verified beyond a shadow of a doubt. Kevin Cho was either completely duped by Michael or he was an active co-conspirator. I was betting on the latter. I dialed his number. "Ava," he answered, his voice laced with surprise. "This is a pleasant surprise. To what do I owe the honor?" "Kevin, Keeping busy, I hope I kept my voice perfectly level. I had a quick legal question I was hoping you could help me with. Oh, of course, anything for you, Ava, he said, a smug, flirty tone creeping into his voice. Let's say there's a real estate contract. The seller is my husband selling my premarital property. During the transaction, I, the owner, am in a coma following a car accident and thus unable to express my true intent. My husband provides a power of attorney apparently signed by me. In your professional opinion as the witnessing notary on the deed, Kevin, how would you assess the legal validity of that contract? The other end of the line went dead silent. I could hear his breathing suddenly ragged and heavy. After a long 10-second pause, he finally spoke, his voice strained. Ava, what are you talking about? Nothing specific, I said, my voice light but laced with ice. Just wanted to remind you of Rule 3.3 of the California Rules of Professional Conduct. A lawyer shall not knowingly make a false statement of fact or law to a tribunal or fail to correct a false statement of material fact. If that lawyer engages in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation, well, that's not just grounds for disbarment. It's a felony. I just trusted my friend's integrity, he stammered. Michael told me you were fine, just some minor injuries, and that you signed the POA yourself. I didn't know. You didn't know. My voice rose slightly. Are you a first-year associate, Kevin? Do you think a judge would buy that, or do you think your firm's reputation can withstand the scandal when this goes public? What do you want, Ava? He finally snarled, abandoning the pretense. It's done. The property has been transferred. You can't change it even if you drag me down with you. I don't want anything. I said, my words precise and sharp. I'm giving you 24 hours. I want you as the witnessing notary to submit a formal declaration to both the court and the county recorder's office. The declaration will state that you have since come to believe the power of attorney used in the transaction was fraudulent, and you are therefore petitioning to have the transfer of title rescinded. Are you insane? That's admitting professional misconduct. My career will be over. I don't care about your career. What I care about is that if you don't do it, my legal team will be filing a comprehensive complaint with the state bar and the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. Then you won't be worried about misconduct. You'll be worried about a criminal indictment. I paused, delivering the final blow. You're a smart guy, Kevin. You can either cut off your own arm to save your life, or I can burn your entire world to the ground. Your choice. I hung up, giving him no room to negotiate. The only way to deal with an opportunist like him was to make him understand that the cost of betraying me was infinitely higher than any benefit he thought he was getting. He would make the right choice. And once the recorder's office received a declaration of fraud from the witnessing notary, the entire house of cards Michael and David Lynn had built would collapse. Not only that, but the $1.5 million would be clawed back from Starlight Investments and held by the court pending the outcome of the now voided sale. They wouldn't see a single dime. Just as I finished the call, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Miss Chen, this is Sophia Lin. I know you're awake. Michael, he wasn't thinking clearly. Please, I'm begging you, have mercy on him. We're willing to give the condo back. Just please release the hold on his account so he can come home. Please. I almost laughed at the cloying, sanctimonious tone. Have mercy. Did they have any mercy for me when they left me for dead? I could picture her now, typing this with tears in her eyes, playing the victim. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I typed back a short reply, have him call me himself. Then I blocked the number and tossed the phone aside. The power in this game was mine. If they wanted to beg, they would do it on my terms. I underestimated Kevin Cho's survival instinct. It didn't take him 24 hours. Leo called me the next morning, his voice electric. Ava, it's done. The coward caved. First thing this morning, he filed a declaration with the court and the recorder, throwing Michael completely under the bus. Claims he was deceived. The county recorder has already put a freeze on the property title and is initiating the process to rescind the transfer. I knew he would, I said calmly. For a self-serving rat like Kevin, loyalty lasts only as long as it's profitable. Now Michael and the Lynns are totally screwed, Leo said, gloating. They don't get the house and the money is locked up by the court. David Lynn's plan to use it to bail out his company is dead in the water. We're not done yet, I said, my fingers tapping a soft rhythm on the kitchen counter. I need you to do one more thing. Anonymously leak Kevin's declaration to a few legal news outlets and journalism blogs. Ava, Leo paused. You're going to professionally bury him. He chose his side, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. He had a chance to do the right thing, and he chose fraud. I want the entire legal community in this city to know who he is. I want him to be so toxic that he can never practice law here again. When you pull out weeds, you have to get the roots. I understand, Leo said after a moment, his voice now firm. The bulldog was back. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of tea. Sunlight streamed into the empty room, making the dust motes dance. My revenge was unfolding like a perfectly designed net tightening with each move. Michael's career, his money, his reputation, all turning to ash. Yet I felt no joy, only a profound, hollow emptiness. I scrolled through the photos on my phone, 5 years of memories with Michael. Our wedding photos, trips to Paris and Kyoto, candid snapshots from lazy Sunday mornings. In every picture, his smile was so genuine, his eyes so full of adoration, I had believed it was real. Now it was clear he was just a world-class actor playing the part of a loving husband. How can someone fake it for so long, for 1, 8, 2, 6 days? Or had he loved me once, and that love was just too cheap, too fragile to withstand the allure of his old flame? I didn't know, and I didn't want to know anymore. One by one, I deleted every single photo. As I was about to delete the last one, a selfie from our first anniversary, a video call popped up on the screen. It was Michael. He was finally ready to face me himself, I answered. The face that appeared, however, wasn't his. It was Sophia Lynn, her face tear-streaked and puffy. She was in what looked like a luxurious hotel room, but she was a mess. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes red and swollen. "Miss Chen!" "Ava," she began, her voice already cracking, "I'm begging you. Please let Michael go. Let us go." I said nothing, just stared at her coldly. "We don't want the condo. We don't want any of the money," she sobbed. "We just want to come home. All of Michael's cards are frozen. We're penniless. We can't even pay for this hotel room. He collapsed yesterday. He had to go to the hospital. The doctors said it was a stress-induced." She devolved into a rant about how cruel and heartless I was, as if I were the villain who had destroyed their beautiful love story. "Are you finished?" I asked calmly when she paused for breath. Sophia froze, stunned by my placid reaction. "Good," I said, my voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight of command. "When you're done, put Michael on the phone. You are not qualified to negotiate with me." Sophia's face flushed with anger and shame. The camera shook, and then Michael's face filled the screen. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a few days. His hair was a mess, his face stubbled, and his eyes were sunken in dark circles. The expensive shirt he'd been wearing was now rumpled and stained. The suave, confident man I had married was gone, replaced by a haggard, cornered animal. He shoved Sophia aside and glared into the camera, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Ava, you're a real piece of work," he spat. "What the hell do you want, to see me dead?" "See you dead," I let out a short, sharp laugh. "Michael, let's be clear. You're the one who did the pushing here. You sold my home while I was in a coma, stole all my money, and ran off with your mistress. Did you ever stop to think what would have happened to me if I hadn't woken up?" My voice turned sharp as steel. "Did you ever think about my parents? I'm their only child. What would have happened to them if they learned you had left me to die?" He was speechless, his face turning pale. I didn't want you to die," he stammered. I just wanted what was mine," he burst out. "Those 5 years living in your world, being treated like a pet project by your parents, I was suffocating. Do you think I enjoyed that? And this was your solution." I looked at him with a feeling of profound pity. "Michael, you have never understood the real problem. You don't hate me and you don't hate my family. You hate your own mediocrity." The words struck him like a physical blow. "You're wrong," he roared. "Don't you get cocky, Ava. You think you've won. The condo is sold. The contract is signed. So what if you froze the money? The buyer is Sophia's father. It's all in the family. We can drag this out in court for years. Let's see who gives up first." He clearly didn't know about Kevin Cho's betrayal yet. He didn't know the sale was about to be voided. Watching him bluster full of pathetic, false bravado, I suddenly felt tired of it all. "Michael," I said slowly, my voice flat and final, "I'm going to give you one last chance. You and Sophia are on the next flight back to San Francisco. You will come to my home, you will get on your knees, and you will beg for my forgiveness. Then you will sign the divorce papers, agreeing to walk away with nothing. If you do that, I will consider limiting my actions to civil court." "You're dreaming," he shrieked as if I'd mortally insulted him. "You want me to kneel to you. Who the hell do you think you are?" "Very well." I nodded, a cold smile playing on my lips. "It seems you don't want the chance." I paused, then played my final card. By the way, I forgot to mention, your Cypress Cove proposal, I sent it to Aperture and Horizon. If all goes as planned, one of them will be on stage accepting the award for it next Monday. At the exact same moment, the servers at Sterling Designs will be permanently erased. As for you, I said, watching the color drain from his face, you're facing multiple felony charges. Embezzlement, conspiracy, wire fraud. The dollar amounts are significant. I'm sure you know how many years that adds up to in federal prison. Avia Michael let out a primal scream and hurled his phone against the hotel room wall. The screen shattered and the video feed cut to black. The connection was dead, but I knew my words had branded themselves onto his soul. His last line of defense had been obliterated. All that was left for him now was terror. I leaned against the wall, feeling utterly drained. The confrontation, even across an ocean, had taken everything out of me. Just then, my phone rang again, a local number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. A low, cautious male voice spoke. Am I speaking with Miss Ava Chen? This is she. Miss Chen, my name is Robert Davies. I'm the legal counsel for Starlight Investments. My client, Mr. David Lin, would like to schedule a meeting with you to discuss the property in Nob Hill, in person. The old fox was finally coming out of his hole. I arranged the meeting with David Lin at the Glitch. It was my turf. It gave me a home field advantage. He arrived early and alone. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his graying hair perfectly combed. Despite the fatigue in his eyes, he projected an air of authority and success. When he saw me, he managed a complex, weary smile. Miss Chen, you're even younger and more composed than I imagined. I ignored the pleasantries. Mr. Lin, I don't think we have anything to chat about. My terms have already been delivered to your associate. David Lin's smile faltered for a second before he sighed and sat down across from me. He picked up the small teapot on the table and poured me a cup. Ava, may I call you Ava? I admit we handled this situation poorly. Michael is young and impulsive, and my Sophia, she was desperate, cornered by the family's financial troubles. They made a foolish mistake. As the elder, I bear some of the responsibility. In a few smooth sentences, he'd tried to reframe a calculated predatory fraud into a simple case of kids being kids. And I picked up the cup but didn't drink, watching the tea leaves unfurl in the hot water. Are you here to apologize on their behalf? Yes and no, he said, his eyes suddenly sharp. Ava, we're both practical people. Let's not waste time. You're smart enough to know that escalating this doesn't do either of us any good. Oh, I raised an eyebrow. Enlighten me. You may have frozen Michael's accounts and spooked that idiot lawyer into retracting his statement, but the title to the property has not yet reverted to you, and the $1.5 million is still tied up with the court. A lawsuit to resolve this will take at least a year, maybe more. That's a significant loss of time and opportunity cost for you. As for my company, he continued, pressing his advantage, this money would have been helpful, but it's not life or death. Without it, things will be difficult, but we will survive. You, on the other hand, Miss Chen, you currently have nothing. He was trying to intimidate me to make me feel small and powerless. I laughed. Mr. Lin, I think you're mistaken about who has nothing. I set my cup down with a sharp click. The one with nothing to lose right now is you. His expression tightened. Starlight Investments, I said conversationally. Registered in the Cayman Islands, I presume. A classic offshore entity, great for tax avoidance and privacy. But they have one major weakness: they can't withstand scrutiny. Especially when they get tangled up in an international money laundering investigation. I watched his pupils contract. Yesterday, I continued pressing harder. I asked a friend of mine, a lawyer who specializes in forensic accounting for short-selling firms, to begin a full-scale due diligence investigation into Starlight Investments. I'm sure it won't be long before the IRS and the Department of Justice take a very keen interest in a company with such questionable transactions. You're threatening me, he hissed, surging to his feet and leaning over the table. I'm advising you, I replied, meeting his glare without flinching. You're a businessman, Mr. Lin. You understand risk versus reward. You can either sacrifice your entire life's work for your daughter's pathetic little romance, or you can cut your losses and cooperate with me. You're a smart man. I'm sure you'll make the right choice. The air in the room was thick with tension. We were locked in a silent battle of wills. He was betting I was bluffing. I was betting he wouldn't risk his empire to find out. He was the first to break. He sank back into his chair, the energy draining out of him. He looked at me with a new expression, fear. What are your terms? He asked, his voice rough. Simple. I laid out my demands. First, Michael and Sophia are on the next flight home. I want them standing in front of me, ready to account for their actions. Second, Starlight Investments will formally stipulate to the court that the purchase contract was fraudulent, waive all claims, and cooperate fully to have the title revert to me immediately. Third, and most importantly, I said, locking my eyes on his, I want everything you have on the Cypress Cove project. That includes the design proposal Michael gave you, and more importantly, all the market research, political connections, and strategic partnerships you've been developing to support it. He looked up, stunned. You're going after Cypress Cove. Why not? I retorted. Michael used my assets to pave your way. I'm just taking back what's mine. With interest. He finally understood. My goal was never just about getting my condo back or punishing Michael. It was about taking the very prize they had tried to steal and making it my own. I was going to use Michael's creative work and his father-in-law's resources to build my own empire on the ashes of their scheme. He stared at me, a vein throbbing in his temple. The internal battle was visible on his face, but in the end, he was a pragmatist. He had no other choice. Fine, he bit out the word, tasting like poison in his mouth. I agree, but you have to promise to leave Sophia out of this after it's over. Done, I nodded. As long as she stays out of my way, I have no interest in her. But Michael, he will pay for what he did. We had a deal. No contracts, no signatures, just 2 verbal promises. But we both knew it was more binding than any legal document. We both held the power to annihilate the other. As David Lynn walked away looking 10 years older than when he'd arrived, I knew I had won the war. But my real offensive was just beginning. The next day, David Lynn made good on his word. Michael and Sophia were on the first flight from Vancouver back to San Francisco. I didn't go to the airport. I simply had Leo send 2 of his largest, most imposing paralegals to escort them from their gate to a very specific location. A place they never wanted to see again, my condo. When I walked through the door, they were standing awkwardly in the middle of the empty living room. They both looked gaunt and exhausted, like refugees from a failed state. Sophia's expensive Chanel suit was hopelessly wrinkled, her face pale and drawn. At the sight of me, she flinched and instinctively hid behind Michael. Michael's expression was a chaotic storm of anger, resentment, and a flicker of something he would never admit: fear. "Ava," he said, his voice a dry rasp, "we're back. What more do you want?" I ignored him. My eyes went past him, settling on Sophia. "Miss Lynn," I said coolly, "we meet again." She trembled, unable to look at me. "I have a question for you," I said, walking slowly towards her. "When you were crying to Michael about your father's bankruptcy, did you ever imagine he would sell his wife's home out from under her while she lay dying?" I didn't," she stammered, her face white as a sheet. "I didn't know he would do that. I was so scared." "You didn't know," I let out a cold, sharp laugh. "The watch on your wrist, the necklace at your throat, the designer clothes on your back, every single piece bought with my money. You seemed to enjoy it all just fine. You didn't have any questions then." My voice grew louder, each word a hammer blow. "When you were living it up in a 5-star hotel planning your rosy future on my dime, did it ever occur to you that the woman you left behind in that hospital might never wake up?" "No, it wasn't like that," she cried, backing away until her back hit the cold wall. She finally broke, sliding to the floor and burying her head in her hands, sobbing. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Her apology was cheap and worthless. I turned my attention back to Michael, who had stood silent and rigid through the entire exchange. "Now it's your turn," I said. "Kneel." "What did you say?" He looked at me as if I'd lost my mind, a scornful smirk twisting his lips. "Ava, don't push it. I'm back. I've agreed to give you the condo. You want to humiliate me now." "Humiliate you." The words were so absurd I almost laughed again. "Michael, compared to what you did to me, is asking you to kneel. Really a humiliation." I stepped up to him until we were inches apart, looking up into his haunted eyes. I could smell the sour scent of fear and exhaustion on him. "While I was in a coma, you used forged documents to sell my home and run off with my money and your lover. That is betrayal. My parents treated you like their own son, and you nearly caused them the grief of burying their only child. That is despicable. You used my money to buy luxury gifts for another woman. That is shameful." With every word, I took another step forward, and with every step the color drained further from his face. "You schemed and plotted to destroy our 5-year marriage and trample on every ounce of love and trust I ever gave you. That is heartless." Now all I am asking is for you to get on your knees and apologize for your betrayal, your despicable actions, your shameful greed, and your heartless cruelty. Do you really think that is too much to ask?" My voice was quiet, but the words were scalpels, methodically dissecting his pathetic ego, exposing the rotten core of his character for all to see. Michael's body began to shake. He opened his mouth to argue, to rage, but no sound came out. He knew it was all true. Even Sophia, crying in the corner, had stopped looking at him with a dawning expression of shock and horror, as if seeing the real man for the first time. The silence stretched on. Just when I thought his pride would win out, that he would defy me to the last, his knees began to buckle. Thud. The sound of his knees hitting the hardwood floor echoed in the empty room. He kept his head bowed, his hands braced on the floor, knuckles white from the strain. In that moment, I felt no triumph. Only a vast, empty sadness. The man kneeling before me was a stranger. The man who had once knelt to offer me a ring and a lifetime of promises was gone forever. This new man was kneeling only to save himself from prison. "I'm sorry," he choked out the words, thick with shame. I looked down at him and shook my head. "It's too late, Michael." From my bag, I produced 2 documents and dropped them on the floor in front of him, a divorce petition and a marital settlement agreement. "Sign them," I said coldly. "You walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back. We are done." He looked up at the papers, his eyes filled with despair. He knew this was the end. 5 years of what he considered sacrifice and subservience, all for nothing. He was right back where he started, only worse. In a sudden, desperate movement, he lunged not for the pen but for the papers, intending to rip them to shreds. I was faster. I stomped my foot down the sharp heel of my shoe, driving directly into the bones of his hand. "Arr!" He screamed a raw, piercing sound of agony, his face contorted in pain. "Michael, do not test my patience." My voice was as cold as a Siberian winter. "I ran out of patience the day you sold this condo. You have 2 choices. 1, you sign these papers and get out of my life. 2, I call the police right now and you can spend the next decade repenting in a federal penitentiary." The combination of pain and terror finally shattered what was left of his will. With a trembling hand, he picked up the pen. His eyes were vacant, his movements robotic. He didn't even read the documents, just scrawled his name on every signature line. When he finished the last one, he collapsed a puppet with its strings cut. I removed my heel from his hand and picked up the signed agreements, checking them carefully. Satisfied, I tossed his copy back at him. "We're finished here," I said, looking from him to the shivering woman in the corner as if they were trash to be taken out. "Now get out of my house." Michael didn't move, just knelt there, staring blankly at the floor. It was Sophia who scrambled to her feet, pulling at his arm. "Michael, let's go, let's just go," she pleaded, her voice choked with relief. He remained motionless for a moment longer. Then he slowly lifted his head and looked at me, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Ava, did you ever really love me?" The question was so pathetic, so self-serving, I almost laughed. Even now, he was grasping for a way to salvage his ego. If I had loved him then, this was all just a lover's quarrel, a punishment, not a complete and total annihilation. I decided to deny him even that last miserable comfort. "Love," I looked him straight in the eye, my voice clear and precise. "The moment you told your first lie for Sophia Lynn, you became unworthy of that word." I paused, then let a bright, almost cruel smile spread across my face. "As for me, oh, I loved you. But the moment I woke up in that hospital, I took that love and I killed it myself." The last flicker of light in Michael's eyes died. He allowed Sophia to pull him to his feet. Together they stumbled out of the condo like a pair of beaten dogs fleeing into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind them. Silence. I stood alone in the center of the living room for a long time. Then I walked to the window and pulled back the heavy drapes I'd had installed. Sunlight flooded the room, illuminating every floating dust mote, and it illuminated the 2 silent, cold tears that were for the first time tracing a path down my cheeks. Goodbye, Michael, and goodbye to 5 years of my life. Today, Ava Chen is reborn. After exorcising the ghosts of my past, I didn't waste a moment. My real work was just beginning. I immediately called Leo. His first task was to file the divorce papers and finalize the title transfer for the condo. His second was to analyze the trove of data on the Cypress Cove project that David Lynn had provided. "This is everything," Leo said, stunned after reviewing the files. "Market analysis, feasibility studies, political contacts. It's our ammunition, I replied. Michael's firm is a hollow shell, but his core design concept combined with Lynn's groundwork is valuable, and now it all belongs to us. Ava, are you saying we're going to take over the project? Not take over. Reinvent, I corrected him. Michael's design has a spark of creativity, but his vision is small, and the execution is flawed. David Lynn's connections are transactional and short-sighted. I'm going to tear it all down and build something the world has never seen. Leo was silent. He knew this was far beyond the scope of a legal battle. This required capital, a world-class team, and an almost preternatural business sense. Ava, can you do this alone? I'm not alone, I said. Leo, will you join me? I'm starting a new company. I'll triple your current salary and give you 5% equity. I could hear his sharp intake of breath. He was a smart man. He knew this was the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm in, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. Ava, wherever you're going, I'm with you all the way. Securing Leo was step one. He was brilliant, driven, and loyal. But I needed a true visionary, a technical genius. I needed Zoe. When I walked back into the glitch, she was watching an old noir film lazily eating sunflower seeds. Well, if it isn't the conquering hero, she quipped without looking away from the screen. Come to pay your bill. I've come to make you a partner. I slid a folder across the counter to her. I'm founding a new venture, Nexus Capital. I want you as my chief technology officer. 10% equity. Zoe paused her movie. She picked up the folder, glanced at the term sheet, then looked at me, her eyes searching. You're serious? All this for one real estate project? Cypress Cove is just the beginning, I said, shaking my head. I'm not building a resort. I'm building a new reality. A fully integrated ecosystem of IP creation, immersive tourism, and bleeding-edge technology. And you, Zoe, your skills are the engine that will make it all run. I laid out my entire vision for her. It was a plan that dwarfed Michael's proposal. I wasn't just building a luxury hotel. I was creating a narrative world, a real-life video game. Visitors wouldn't just be tourists. They would be players. They would have character roles, go on quests, unlock storylines, and interact with AR characters and environments. Their actions could genuinely affect the world around them. It would be a fully immersive, story-driven experience. Zoe's expertise in hacking network architecture and emerging tech was the key to making it all possible. When I finished, she put down her sunflower seeds. A light I had never seen before was dancing in her eyes. It was the thrill of a grand challenge, the hunger of a brilliant mind for an impossible problem to solve. Ava, she said softly, you're completely insane. So will you be insane with me? I held out my hand. Zoe looked at my hand, then laughed. She ignored my hand and pulled me into a fierce hug. Deal, she said, but my lab's budget is non-negotiable and unlimited. Done. My core team was assembled. A legal and business prodigy, a renegade tech genius, and me, the architect of it all. We were Nexus Capital. For the next week, the glitch became our headquarters. We worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and ambition, refining the new vision for Cypress Cove. We gutted 90% of Michael's original design, keeping only the single brilliant element, a concept based on a local Native American legend of the stargazers, a mythical people who could communicate with the sea and the sky. We made that legend the core of our world. We transformed Cypress Cove into a modern-day sanctuary where visitors could use technology to uncover the secrets of the stargazers, awaken ancient spirit animals in augmented reality, and protect the coastline. We wove a complex narrative, created compelling virtual characters, and designed AR effects that would blend seamlessly with the stunning natural landscape. When the final presentation was complete, the three of us looked at it in silence. We knew we had created something revolutionary. Now we just needed the chance to show it to the one man who mattered, Arthur Kendrick, the formidable old-school chairman of the Kendrick Development Group, the final decision-maker for the entire Cypress Cove project. David Lynn, true to his word, had paved the way. Citing a potential downstream partnership, he had secured me a 15-minute meeting with Kendrick himself. Standing at the base of the gleaming Kendrick Tower in downtown San Francisco, I took a deep breath. These 15 minutes would determine the future of Nexus Capital. They would determine whether I would get the ultimate definitive victory in this war. Arthur Kendrick's office was a reflection of the man himself, imposing traditional and heavy with the scent of old money and power. Behind his massive mahogany desk hung a simple piece of calligraphy, discipline. Kendrick was in his late 60s with a full head of silver hair and eyes that, though aged, were as sharp and predatory as a hawk's. He didn't stand, merely gestured for me to sit. "Miss Chen," he began, his voice a low rumble. "Mr. Lin informed me you were coming. I have 15 minutes. Tell me how your Nexus Capital plans to be involved in the Cypress Cove operational phase." He clearly saw me as just another small-time operator looking for a slice of his pie. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I took a tablet from my briefcase and placed it gently on the desk in front of him. "Mr. Kendrick, before we talk about operations, I'd like to show you something." On the screen, our 3D animated concept video for the Stargazer initiative began to play. It opened with a sweeping cinematic drone shot of the pristine Cypress Cove coastline. A deep, resonant voiceover began to tell the ancient legend. As the story unfolded, the real-world scenery began to merge with stunning virtual effects. A visitor points their phone at a seaside boulder, and ancient petroglyphs glow to life on its surface. They walk along the beach, and their footsteps leave trails of glowing blue energy leading towards the ocean. A colossal spectral whale breaches from the sea in a shower of starlight soaring through the air above the cove. Kendrick, who had been leaning back in his chair, slowly sat bolt upright. The dismissive look on his face melted away, replaced by surprise, then awe, and finally profound shock. The video ended on a single tagline: "Cypress Cove, don't just see the legend, live it." Silence filled the office. Kendrick didn't speak. He picked up the tablet and replayed the 3-minute video. Twice. 3 times. His fingers traced the images on the screen as if trying to touch the hyper-realistic virtual creatures. "Can this actually be done?" he finally asked, looking up at me, his voice rough with a new, undisguised emotion. "Technologically, it's not only possible, it's ready," I replied calmly. "And the overhead is significantly lower than you would think." "Who created this proposal?" he demanded. "My team." "What about Sterling Designs? They were a finalist," he said, frowning. "I saw their proposal. It had a spark, but it was nothing like this." "The Sterling Designs proposal was a rough sketch," I said, meeting his intense gaze. "My team took that sketch and turned it into a masterpiece." Kendrick leaned back, his hawk-like eyes truly seeing me for the first time. "You're an ambitious woman, Miss Chen." "In business, Mr. Kendrick, ambition is a virtue." He fell silent again, his fingers drumming a steady rhythmic beat on the mahogany desk. I knew what he was thinking. My plan shattered every conventional notion of a resort development. It was an immense opportunity, but also an unprecedented risk. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I don't want a stake in the operations," I said. Kendrick stared at me dumbfounded. "I don't want anything," I continued. "This entire proposal, the intellectual property, the core technology, the creative concept, I am willing to transfer it to the Kendrick Development Group, free of charge." This time Kendrick shot to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? You just give me this." "It's not a gift." I smiled, finally playing my trump card. "I have one condition. The master design and implementation contract for the entire Cypress Cove project must be awarded exclusively to my company, Nexus Capital. And I want the previous bidding process, including the 3 finalists, declared null and void." The room was utterly still. Kendrick stared at me, his eyes boring into me as if trying to read my soul. He understood my gambit. I wasn't here for a slice of the pie. I was here to rewrite the recipe. I had offered him an irresistible vision of the future in exchange for a ticket to the game, a ticket that would allow me to legally and publicly execute Michael and his plagiarizing competitors. It was an insane, audacious, and brilliant checkmate. "Miss Chen," Kendrick said, his voice now heavy with gravitas. He walked around the desk and stood before me. "Do you have any idea what kind of blow it would be to my company's reputation to nullify a public bidding process at this late stage? And do you have any idea what kind of blow it would be to miss out on a project that will redefine the entire industry?" I countered. "Ha!" Suddenly he threw his head back and laughed, a loud booming sound that filled the office. "Ava Chen, you've got guts. In all my years, I've never met a young person with your kind of audacity." The laughter stopped and he looked at me, his eyes blazing. "The project is yours. I don't care how you do it, how you handle the other firms or the press. I want what I just saw on that screen built on my land. Make it happen." "You have a deal, Mr. Kendrick." I stood and extended my hand. Our hands clasped, his wrinkled and powerful representing the old guard of capital and concrete, mine steady and firm representing the new wave of ideas and technology. It was more than a deal. It was the dawn of a new era. When I stepped out of Kendrick Tower, the sun was setting, casting my shadow long across the plaza. I pulled out my phone and called Leo. "Leo, get ready," I said, my voice calm but vibrating with suppressed excitement. "Step 1, file a motion to dismiss all our lawsuits against Sterling Designs, Aperture, and Horizon." "What?" Leo cried. "Ava, after all that, we're just letting them go." "Step 2, I continued, ignoring his protest. "Draft a formal invitation from Nexus Capital to the leadership of all 3 firms." "An invitation to what?" I looked at the setting sun, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across my face. "An invitation to the official launch event for the Cypress Cove Stargazer Initiative. It's time they saw what a real masterpiece looks like." I wasn't suing them anymore. I had found a punishment far more fitting and far more cruel than a courtroom battle. I was going to make them sit in the front row and watch as I built my empire on the foundation of their stolen dreams. They would be nothing more than footnotes in my success story, bitter spectators to an era they were too small to be a part of. The launch event for the Cypress Cove Stargazer Initiative was held 1 week later on-site at the project's future location. Kendrick Development had spared no expense transforming a stretch of pristine beach into a futuristic open-air amphitheater. The guest list was a who's who of media, tech, and finance. It was the hottest ticket in town. No one knew that the star of the show wasn't the titan Arthur Kendrick or one of the embattled design firms, but a brand new, unknown company called Nexus Capital. Backstage, Zoe was making final adjustments to the AR projection system, while Leo, sweating profusely, triple-checked the guest list. "Ava, they're all here," Leo whispered, joining me by the monitor. "Michael, the CEOs from Aperture and Horizon, and Sophia and David Lynn, all sitting in the 3rd row just like you wanted." I looked at the screen. Michael was skeletal, his eyes hollow as he stared blankly ahead. Sophia sat huddled next to him, looking terrified. David Lynn's face was a stony mask of forced composure. The executives from the other 2 firms were whispering to each other, smirking. They thought this was all just corporate theater, a face-saving gesture, before Kendrick announced one of them as the winner. They had no idea they were lambs to the slaughter. "Good." I smoothed down the lapels of my custom-tailored white pantsuit. I was a general ready for battle. "Ava," Zoe called out, handing me a tiny earpiece. "I'm patched in. I'll be your eyes and ears on the tech side." I smiled at her and fitted the earpiece. It was time. When I walked onto the stage as the founder and CEO of Nexus Capital, a confused murmur rippled through the audience. I scanned their faces, seeing the curiosity in the reporters' eyes, the disdain from my would-be competitors, and the raw, unadulterated shock on Michael's face. He never dreamed that the wife he had left for dead would reappear like this, standing on a stage he could only ever dream of occupying. I walked to the podium and took the microphone. "Good evening. My name is Ava Chen, and I am the founder of Nexus Capital." I began, my voice clear and steady. "I know many of you have questions. Why would the Kendrick Group entrust a project of this magnitude to a brand new company? Why were the 3 finalists suddenly sidelined? Today, I'm here to give you the answer." I clicked a remote in my hand. The massive LED screen behind me lit up, and our presentation began. But this time, it wasn't just on a screen. As the video played, Zoe's AR system brought it to life. The spectral whale soared over the audience's heads. The ethereal form of a stargazer appeared on the rocks by the sea, her voice echoing through the sound system. The entire beach became an enchanted, magical space. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Phones were raised, capturing the impossible. Even the smirking executives were now slack-jawed, their arrogance forgotten in the face of pure, unadulterated awe. I saw Michael. He was staring up at the sky, his face a canvas of utter despair. He recognized the seed of the idea, the stargazers, but in my hands it had grown into something beyond his wildest imagination. He was a child who had made a crude clay figure, now forced to witness a master sculptor turn that same clay into a breathtaking statue of a god. The humiliation was absolute. When the demonstration ended, the applause was deafening. I let it die down before I spoke again, my eyes finding Michael's in the crowd. "A good idea is like a seed," I said, my voice carrying across the silent audience. "Some people can only grow it into a small flower in a pot for their own private enjoyment. Others can plant it in the fertile ground of vision and technology and grow it into a forest. The previous proposals all had merit, but Cypress Cove doesn't need another flower, it needs a forest. My words were a final public slap in the face to Michael and his competitors. They knew in that moment that they had not just been beaten, they had been rendered obsolete. After the presentation, I left the media scrum to Arthur Kendrick and walked down to the water's edge. The sea breeze felt clean, washing away the last dregs of the past. I heard footsteps behind me. I knew who it was without turning. "You won," Michael said, his voice a dry husk. "Completely." I turned to face him. In the fading light, he looked like a ghost. The arrogant, self-assured man I married was gone, replaced by this broken, empty shell. "This was never about winning or losing," I said quietly. "It was about choices. You chose your past. I chose my future. That's all." He gave a bitter smile and held something out to me. It was our wedding ring. "Here, I wish you the best, Ava." He turned and walked away without another word, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched his lonely figure recede down the beach, then looked at the cold, heavy ring in my palm. With a flick of my wrist, I threw it as hard as I could into the ocean. It vanished into the waves without a trace, just like our dead love. My phone vibrated. It was Zoe. "Ava, you need to see the news, right now." I opened a news app. A breaking local alert popped up: suspect arrested in high-profile hit-and run, shocking motive revealed. I clicked the link. The article featured a grainy security camera still, a dark sedan, moments after slamming into my car, speeding away from the scene. And in the driver's seat, a profile that, though blurry, was instantly recognizable. It was Kevin Cho. The article stated that after having his law license suspended, he had become obsessed and vengeful. He had been stalking me, looking for a chance to get back at me. The night of the crash, he had been drinking. He saw me leaving the office, and in a drunken rage, he had floored it. My crash wasn't an accident. I stood there on the beach, the phone in my hand, the sea breeze suddenly turning cold. The war I thought I had just won was only the first battle. My new life was just beginning, and the enemies I didn't even know I had were only just starting to crawl out of the darkness.